I thought I'd put on my Navy hat. When I was young, I joined the Naval Reserve, and I was in the Naval Reserve for 8 years. Now, I never really saw any action. I never was in any fight. This was during the Korean War, and of course Korea was not a major need for warships up there. So the U.S. Kenneth M. Willett was the ship that I trained on. We would train during the summer, and I joined when I was 17. I wasn't even out of school, and they said that was alright, that we could join when we were 17 as long as we were 18 by January the next year. And that summer we went to boot camp. We went to boot camp in Chicago, Great Lakes Training Center. And so I learned a lot, and I experienced a lot, and I look back on it and I think about how much that really you can learn from almost anything you do. I mean, you're learning about life. That's why you're here for, and you can certainly learn about life on a Navy ship, I'll tell you that. This ship had 2 5-inch 38 guns, and then a bunch of smaller guns. I learned how to shoot those 5-inch 38s as well as the smaller guns. And just tell you a little bit about my first training cruise. We went down in the Gulf, and we would train for a couple of weeks, and we'd end up at some port down there, some island, and usually a small place that the tourists didn't go to. And I can't really remember which one it was now. It's been over 50 years ago. And so that's what we did. On the way down there, we trained with gunnery, and the main idea of this ship is submarine, anti-submarine warfare, escort vessels for convoys. She's 300 feet long, pretty good sized ship, and has a complement of a little over 100 men. And the training cruises and that thing went pretty well, and I thought they were pretty interesting, and I loved the sea. I never had seen the ocean before I went down there, because after all, I was born in Oklahoma, so I'd never been anywhere close to the ocean. But as soon as I got out there on it, I loved it. I could swim well, but I wasn't worried about having to swim. At least I hope not, anyway. When we started off on this cruise, we went down to Dry Tortugas first, which is they call it Dry Tortugas because there's no water on it, no fresh water anyway, and there's a fort built on it. And this fort's was used several times during the history of the United States. I think during the Civil War, and it was a real interesting fort to go through. You can look these places up on the internet if you want to and see. And then as we went down, we did our trainings. We did training in chasing submarines and shooting the big guns and things like that. But the real lesson I learned was when I got into this port. This port was this country that we went to was a poor country by our standards. And when our ships went into the docks, and usually on a Friday night, and then we got leave Saturday and Sunday, and then we'd ship out the next Monday morning for more training. And when we started to get off the ship, the dock was just filled with people, and all these people, a lot of children there, and there were taxi cabs parked around there, and people were wanting to take us places in taxi cabs, and there were some people wanting to sell us things, and it was like a big marketplace, really. And so this little boy come running up to me and Al, the guy that I was with, and he said, "Give me a dime, sailor. Give me a dime." So I gave him a dime, and he looked toward Albert, and he said, "Give me a dime." And Albert reached, drew his hand back and to reach up into his cigarette pocket up in the jersey of the Navy uniform, and the little kid threw his hands up over his face and moved back. I guess he thought Al was drawing his hand back to hit him, but of course he wasn't. And he gave the little kid a dime, and then he asked for more dimes, and I told him, I said, I'm not made out of money. And he looked at me, and I'll never forget that look. And he said, "You American, you rich." And I'll never forgive that. Because to them, we were, even though I come from a poor family in the United States, grew up on the north side of town, to them, we were very rich people. And the look in that little kid's eyes, I will never, ever forget. And there was a taxi cab driver there, and big old Cadillac, and he asked he said, "I'll take you anywhere you want to go, all over town, all day long, for $1. And there was about 6 of us in my group, and so we said, "Okay, we'll take you up on it." So we all jumped in this cab and we took off. And he took us to, first place he took us was to a winery. He figured that us being sailors, we'd want to do things like drink and chase girls and get tattoos and stuff like that, which didn't much interest me at all, but I went along with the group, and we went to this wine place where the factory where they made wine, and it was a real nice setting. It was like a park, out in the park, where we sat around these benches, and they brought us out different kinds of wine for us to taste, and so we did, and they were real cordial to us. And when we got through there, we left and went on back into town and to eat and do the things we wanted to do. And some of the sailors did get tattoos, and some of the sailors did chase the girls, but I didn't. In fact, I was going to get married within a year or so. I'd been going with my soon-to-be wife for several years, and I respected that, and that's what I wanted to do. So I visited a lot of the shops and the places you could buy expensive perfumes down there for about 1/10 of what you could in the United States, and I did do that. I bought a few little items to bring back with me, and they said we could do that as long as it wasn't too excessive, and they had to check, see how much you had. And we finally that evening, the taxi cab driver brought us on back to the ship, and so we started to pay him, and we each gave him $1, and then some people gave him $1 more for a tip. I did that, and when he ended up, he had like $12. We'd each given him $1, and I asked him. I was really curious about the culture. I said, "How does that compare with what you make normally?" And he said, looked at me and he said, I won't make $12 in a month carrying people around. And I thought, wow, we just don't know how fortunate we are living in this country, having the freedoms that we have. So I've never forgot that little boy, and I've never forgot that taxi cab driver, and that was just on my first cruise. I made a lot of cruises, and I had a lot of adventures, and I'll be telling more about them later. And some of them were good, and some of them were not so good. And thank you for listening to me.